Hello there, kia ora. I sometimes wonder what planet some of our MPs are on. There's always some weird stuff that's coming through, like when Andy Foster tried to mansplain to a reporter that she should support New Zealand First attempts to vilify trans people in amateur sports, or Nationals Maureen Pugh claiming that she's been hit by lightning 3 times. But this week, we saw a new level of weird from Workplace Relations Minister Brooke Van Velden. When asked if she agreed that the current government was the most anti-worker government ever, well, she disagreed. And that part in itself isn't weird, and it's a fair question, and her answer is clearly a standard answer because the facts are completely inconsistent with it. After all, this is the government that canned fair pay agreements before they started, despite official advice that they'd have a huge benefit for Māori, Pacifica, and young workers. This is the government that saw the smallest minimum wage increase ever, which was more than Brooke actually wanted to give people, or the tax quote-unquote relief for low-wage earners being barely a couple of dollars a week. This government's the one that reinstated 90-day trials for big business in a move that lawyers described as contrary to the intentions of the Employment Relations Act. Van Velden's the one who wants to change sick pay to an accrual system for part-time workers and rewrite health and safety regulations in the Holidays Act, which is also a bit of a worry considering she's also the one that said that when it came to COVID, we completely blew out the value of a life. She's the one pushing for law changes around contractors that seems to have been written specifically by Uber after they lost a high court bid to not be able to call drivers employees and treat them like employees. It was this government that stopped the wage subsidy scheme for some disabled people that saw their wages topped up to a minimum wage with no plan to change the laws that even make that travesty possible. So why then is her answer in the House this week so weird? Well, she followed it up with a rant about vaccine mandates using what seemed like Voices for Freedom talking points. Here, have a listen.
Mr. Speaker, no, I don't agree with that statement because I believe, in fact, the most anti-worker government we've seen in decades is the previous government. It was the previous government that ordered vaccine mandates for workers. Never before have we seen the rights of workers across this country be eroded so swiftly. Not only did this erode workers' freedom of choice and bodily autonomy, so many people were forced out of their jobs because the government refused to look at other options like rat tests. Rather than listen to those affected workers, the previous government pushed them to the margins of society. The previous government's legislative overreach led to ostracism and division that have hugely impacted our civil society and had a negative impact on the employment and earnings of Kiwi individuals.
The height of the pandemic response definitely had issues, for sure. Faith-based communities, for example, came across problems like how Muslim communities under level 4 restrictions had a lot of trouble accessing halal food. And all through the initial response, even before the vaccines were developed, the business interests that Van Velden listens to so fervently over workers were throwing their toys about how cruel and mean the old left-wing government was by not letting everyone just do what they want and let the strong survive, as long as they could still spend money. It doesn't seem to matter to them either that the News Hub Reid research poll in the May of 2020 said 91.6% of respondents felt measures were right, or in 2021, a spin-off poll found 79% of people approved the choices the government made. And in 2022, the Herald found 57% of respondents thought the COVID response had been well judged and appropriate. And in 2021, Talbot Mills found 79% of health workers, 72% of teachers, 71% of hospo workers, and 70% of supermarket staff supported mandates. And a Colmar poll for One News in November that year found 74% of the entire country supported workplace vaccination mandates, or that private business organisations actually created rules around vaccine mandates for their staff, and there were already fields like education and health that had mandates in place as part of their job. But what is really concerning here isn't that Brooke thinks this is what being unfriendly to workers looks like, keeping them alive and safe, and her government's actions aren't anti-worker. She can't see that at all. That's been telegraphed for years, to be honest. It's actually that she is the minister overseeing the second phase of the Royal Commission into the government COVID response, and is one of the few people who have seen the report on that first phase. And it comes at a really concerning time since the government's slashing funding into extremism research in the country. ACT tried really hard to bury claims that they were a party determined to appeal to conspiracy theorists in the lead up to the election, after losing half a dozen candidates because they didn't vet them properly. This sort of rant about vaccines, when she should be concerned about the powers of workers uniting, well, it shows that they didn't bury those attitudes far enough. Here, the links to other things that come at the end of YouTube videos. Those ones there, here.